Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So for media servers, I think that probably one of my favorites is Plex. However, Plex Media Server is not open source, and so I also happen to use the Jellyfin Media Server, and I'm going to focus on how to install Jellyfin today, but more importantly, I'm going to focus on how to use Jellyfin with the live TV guide. So if I head over to my Jellyfin client here connected to my Jellyfin server, I have an HDHomeRun tuner. And so an HDHomeRun tuner is a digital tuner that sits on your network. I have a coax cable that heads up to an antenna in my attic, and it has 4 tuners in the HDHomeRun tuner, and so that digital tuner is able to receive 4 separate channels that I can watch over-the-air live content from, and I can also record from. So looking here at the guide, we have a regular TV guide for all of the channels. And in my particular area, we have tons and tons of sub-channels, and in fact, I believe it or not, download 160 channels in my guide. So the tricky part is actually having this guide automated inside of Jellyfin, and that's what today's video is all about. If you're not familiar with the HDHomeRun series of digital tuners, this is their page here, and the name of the company is Silicone Dust. And so Silicone Dust basically creates a tuner device, and that digital tuner device is a Ethernet device that sits on your network, and as I mentioned earlier, connects to your antenna. And in my case, I have an HDHomeRun Flex 4K tuner, and it's a very simple box like you see here. I have an Ethernet connection to it, and I have an antenna connection to it. And basically, it sits out on your network, allows you to watch media content from basically anything in your home. So you can use your smart devices, you can use your computers, you can use your phones, your desktop PCs, or even your tablets, and so it works out really great. And it also supports a TSC 3.0 TV if you have it in your area. I think the only downside of it is that if any of your channels in your area happen to be encrypted, then you cannot watch over an HDHomeRun right now because they don't have a method to de-encrypt it. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about using an HDHomeRun tuner in Jellyfin and then being able to access the TV guide or the live TV guide for the live channels. If we head over to the Jellyfin page here, you can see that Jellyfin is a media server, pretty similar to Plex, except that it is free and open source. It allows you the ability to play movies and shows and music, and they have a live TV and DVR as well that you don't have to pay extra for per se, with a little bit of a caveat. And that makes it really nice if you are not a Plex Pass user, which is required to use the live TV capability inside of Plex. Now, where do we get these TV guides from? Well, if we head over to Wikipedia, there is a service called Schedules Direct, which is a nonprofit organization, as it says here, to provide a low-cost TV program listing service for open source and freeware digital video recorders. And so this particular service is a nonprofit organization. However, they do have to have resources to run their servers and support this ability. so you do have to pay for the Schedules Direct service. If we head over to schedulesdirect.org, here it has a caveat about Jellyfin. And specifically, it says all versions of Jellyfin, including 10.10.7, which is the latest, have Schedules Direct bugs in them. And in Jellyfin, this will appear as a country region appearing as undefined. And eventually, it will end up getting you blacklisted to connect to your Schedules Direct guide to download your Schedules Direct. So consequently, you need to be able to download the XML version of the Schedules Direct guide and incorporate it into Jellyfin. And this can be a little bit complex, and I have a procedure to be able to download that guide and automate updating it inside of Jellyfin. If I head back over here to my Jellyfin production instance and I look at my administrative menu and go down to Live TV, you can see here that I have my HDHomeRun Flex 4K tuner configured inside of it. And then under TV Guide Providers, my TV Guide provider is XMLTV. So if you press the plus sign next to TV Guide Providers, you have an option to link directly to Schedules Direct, and that's what the Schedules Direct people are talking about that has a bug and does not work right now and can get you blacklisted in trying to get to there. So that the alternative would be to use the XMLTV option, which is not at all automated. And so I have an XMLTV source configured here. And if I hit my hamburger menu on it, I can go up and do a map channels. And here you see all of my channels that are mapped. But the trick is, how do I get the guide associated with that? And it's not just as simple as going in and making that addition. Let's go see how to install Jellyfin and then add your HDHomeRun tuner to Jellyfin. And then after that, how to associate a new guide provider that will be in the XMLTV format to pull its TV guides from Schedules Direct and then to convert them properly for Jellyfin and then to automate the upload of that guide into Jellyfin on a regular schedule. Here I am on my demonstration Incus server, and I'm going to begin by doing an Incus launch images, Ubuntu 2404, Jellyfin, and boot.autostart equals to true, which means that every time the Incus server starts, this container starts. I have added the default profile as well as the bridge profile, and if you watch my video entitled Incus Containers Step by Step to set up an Incus server, you also learned how to create the bridge profile, which presents your container out onto the main LAN. So we're going to do an Incus shell over to the Jellyfin container that we just created. And the first thing that you should do anytime you create a new container is to take all of the upgrades by taking the updates to the repository and then taking any upgrades that the newly installed container operating system will require. We have a series of tools that are going to be required as dependencies in order to install our Jellyfin server. I'm using net-tools just for convenience, OpenSSH server so that I can connect into the machine later, the Nano editor, and then the XMLTV utilities package, and then libxml also, and then the JSON query package as well as curl. Now that all of the dependencies are installed, I'm going to go ahead and create myself a user account like I usually do for best practices, and I'll do an add user Scott. I'll provide Scott with a password, and then I'll verify that password, and then after that we'll go ahead and do a user mod -a capital G sudo Scott, which puts Scott in the sudo group. Before I switch over to my new user account, I'm going to go ahead and add the Jellyfin repository to my Ubuntu container here. Let's download the GPG key to verify the packages coming from the Jellyfin server. Now let's SU or switch user over to my new Scott account. And once we're over here, we're going to do a sudo apt update, which will ask for my sudo password. And then we have the Jellyfin repository into our system, which is what we wanted. And now we're going to go ahead and install the Jellyfin server, and we do that simply with a sudo apt install Jellyfin. Once Jellyfin completes installing, I can check to see if the service is up and running with the sudo systemctl status on Jellyfin. And you can see here that our Jellyfin server is up and operational. Let's find out what the address of this server is by doing an ifconfig. And the ifconfig command tells us that ETH0 is running at 172.16.1.112 on my network. If I go back up to my web browser and go to 172.16.1.112:8096, which is the default port for Jellyfin, and I hit enter, it will go ahead and come up with the quick start for Jellyfin. I'm going to select English. I click next. It asks for my username. I'm going to go ahead and type in Scott, and it asks for a password for Scott, and then it asks me to confirm that password, and I should get that correct. And I click next, and the first thing it asks me to do is to add a media library. Now, of course, I could go over here and click to add a media library, and that's pretty straightforward, where you just point to wherever your media, TV shows, or movies are, for example. But in this particular case, we're going to bypass that because we're more interested in the live TV function. So I'll click next here, and it says, what is your preferred metadata language? It's English, and my region is the United States. I'll click next, and then it says allow connections to this server. We want to leave that checked, and we do not want to check enable automatic port mapping. And if you were going to provide this Jellyfin out on your network, you would have to add an Nginx reverse proxy record for it and have a subdomain name defined at your DNS provider. And then I'll go ahead and click next, and it says you're done, and I'll click finish, and we have our Jellyfin server up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my username, go ahead and type in the password that I just created, and click sign in, and it signs into the Jellyfin server and says nothing is here. I want to add my HDHomeRun tuner as a live TV tuner, so I head up to the hamburger menu, come down to settings, and then go to the administrative dashboard, and then from there I go down to live TV, and then I'll press plus next to the tuner device, and then I'll click down here and I'll say that I have an HDHomeRun tuner, and then it can say detect my devices. In my particular case, I don't think it'll do that because my device happens to be on a VLAN. So I'll go ahead and type in 192.168.30.134, which is the address of my HDHomeRun tuner. And I'll go ahead and scroll down this list. All it really has is restrict channels to those marked as favorites. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and have it do all of my channels. And then you have the option to allow for hardware transcoding. But for simplicity here, and since I don't have heavy duty hardware, I'll go ahead and leave that alone and click save. At this point, I have a tuner. Now, if I were to head back up to my Jellyfin at the top level, I could click live TV, And if I click guide, the guide is going to be completely empty. If I go back to home and I go back to live TV and I go to channels, I could of course click on a channel and play that channel, but I don't have a guide, so therefore I don't know what is presently playing. So there we are, and I go ahead and go back up to home, and I go over here to settings, head back down to the administrative dashboard, head back down to the live TV, and then I have an option to add a live TV guide provider. At this point, if I press the plus next to live TV guide provider, I have an option for Schedules Direct and XMLTV. As I mentioned in the introduction, the Schedules TV section is broken as of the latest version, and it's actually been broken for probably the last 6 to 8 months. So I would have to choose XMLTV, although we're not really ready to do that because the first thing it's going to ask us for is a downloaded XMLTV guide, and we don't yet really have that. So I'll go ahead and hit the back button, and we won't actually add our TV guide provider yet. If I head over to my Schedules Direct account here and I look down the page, they of course have information on the main page, and I can go ahead and click Login. You can create a new account if you like, but you can go ahead and sign on to your existing account if you have one. Although Schedules Direct is a nonprofit service, they do have a cost for being able to accomplish this. And so when you create an account, your Schedules Direct account is a $35 a year option. But for $35 a year, you get as many guides as you want downloaded. And so they have an option up here to add a new lineup, but it says if you're using the JSON service, you do not need to add a lineup through the website. Now that we have our Schedules Direct account created, we want to go ahead and head back to our Jellyfin screen here. And I'm still in the administrative screen, and if I scroll down, there's a section for API keys. I want to go ahead and hit the plus sign to add an API key, and I'm just going to simply call this Guide Update. And this is an API key that I'll need from my script to be able to update my guide. I'll go ahead and copy this API key and keep it for later. Next, I head on back down to the terminal, and here at the terminal, I want to go ahead and use that API key in the context of this curl command. And the purpose of this is to get what is called a refresh guide ID. We also want to copy this refresh guide ID for use later. So now we have to go off and configure our TV guide grabber, and we do so with the TV underbar grab underbar ZZ underbar SD JSON dash dash configure. When I hit enter here, it first asks for a cache file. You can go ahead and default that. And then it says if you're migrating from a different grabber, selecting an alternate channel ID format can make things easier. We're going to go ahead and choose the default, which is option 0. The next question you ask, or you are asked, is what do you want the format to be? And your answer will be format number 1 for date and time. And then it will ask for your Schedules Direct username and password. After providing your Schedules Direct password, it will go ahead and come down to the next menu option, which is telling you which lineups you currently have added for your Schedules Direct account. And I have one for my local area, and it is for an antenna connection, which is usually what you're going to be using with an HDHomeRun tuner. So I'll go ahead and say continue, which is the default, and it will choose mine. If you need to add one, go ahead and do an add. It will ask for your zip code and so on. And so the next thing that we'll ask for is choose whether you want to include complete lineups or individual channels. And I'm going to go ahead and say channels here instead of lineups. And then it will say choose the lineups from which you want to select the channels from. Well, it chooses the one lineup that I had previously. The next answer is I want all. And then it says, okay, here's the first channel. Do you want this channel? And so I again type all. And then it goes ahead and lists all of the channels. In my case, with all of my sub-channels, I have 160 channels total. So now the configuration is complete. Now that the grabber is installed, I can go ahead and execute my first grab. You notice here that I do not currently have any files on my Jellyfin home directory on the Scott account. So in order to pull a guide, I should say, you use the TV grab ZZ SD JSON, and then I pull the guide for 7 days. It says that the maximum you can pull the guide from is 14 days. However, after much testing, I discovered that 7 days really is the maximum. And I say go ahead and output this guide to a file called guide.xml. So it will go ahead and run this routine, and it goes ahead and tells you what it's doing at the time it's doing, where it's pulling the guide from, and it's updating the schedules, getting the channels, doing the lineups, and it will say that it's updating the programs in those lineups, and all kinds of stuff goes on. So we wait here just a minute, and it should complete shortly. The last step in the grabber is to simply write the file out, and now that we have a file here, if I do an ls-al, you'll notice that I have guide.xml. Actually, let's do an ALH, and that guide file is 33 megabytes in size. So let's just go ahead and do a nano on guide.xml just to see what this file looks like, and it will take a little bit to read it in because it has 819,575 files. Yours will certainly differ. So one of the problems that I noticed about this guide is the fact that all the channel numbers are channel numbers with an underscore in them. So for example, we have channel 28 subchannel 4 here. It should be denoted as 28.4, but it's denoted as 28_4. Because of that, if we try to use this guide with Jellyfin, Jellyfin will not actually see anything. So if you import it, you will still have a blank TV guide. Let's go ahead and create a new script, and we're going to do that with the nano update underbar guide.sh. Once you paste this code in from the show notes, if you scroll on up to where it says API key, you want to go ahead and get rid of that placeholder and paste in the API key that you got earlier. Next, we want to go ahead and scroll down 2 lines to where it says task ID, and we want to go ahead and paste in the task ID that we got earlier, and that's the task ID for getting the new guide updated. So we now have the Jellyfin API key in here. We have the Jellyfin URL, which you will not change, and we have the task ID here. And so if you look a little bit further up in the script, you'll also see an SED command, and this SED command is designed to replace all of the underscores in the channel numbers that we looked at earlier with periods the way that Jellyfin is expecting them. So now we're done editing this file. We'll do a Control-O and Enter to write the file out, and a Control-X to exit the nano editor. We need to provide our new script the execute privilege before we can execute it. We do that with the chmod plus X update underbar guide.sh. I also have a useful utility, and for it we're going to go ahead and edit a file called guide underbar menu.sh. And from the show notes, I'll go ahead and paste the code for it in here. Basically, it provides a menu that allows you to list the channel numbers that are downloaded into your guide, the dates that that guide covers, the count of the number of programs it has downloaded, and also the channels, the count of the channels that you have downloaded. So let's do a Control O and Enter to write the file out, and a Control X to exit the nano editor. And just like with the other script, we need to be able to provide this one execute privilege as well with the chmod plus X guide underbar menu.sh. Next, let's go ahead and edit our bash rc command file, and that provides us the commands whenever we start a command shell with the born again shell, which is our shell that we're using. After entering that file, we'll go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of the file. We're going to insert two aliases into the bottom of that file, and then do a Control O and Enter to write the file out, and a Control X to exit the nano editor. In order to be able to execute those new commands and have those definitions available to us, we can do a source ~/.bashrc, and that will go ahead and update those commands so they're available. At this point, I can simply type the command update, and that will go ahead and run the script to update the guide from Schedules Direct, and it goes and runs that procedure. Once our script completes running, you can see that it performed some post-processing to fix the display names. That really means changing those sub-channel names so that we have a channel, for example, instead of 2_1, we have 2.1, which is what Jellyfin expects. Then we validate the XML syntax of guide.xml to make sure that we got a valid file. And then the last step that we do is we use our Jellyfin API to trigger the guide refresh. So let's just go ahead and do a nano on guide.xml to see that our channel numbers are kind of what we expect, and I expect that they will have periods. And here we have 28.4, 28.7, and so on down the list. So I go ahead and exit the nano editor without making any changes. Now I also have this menu command that I created, and it will be an option to, number one, list the channels, and I can go ahead and scroll up and down in all the channel numbers that I have listed, and I'll do a Q to quit and return to the menu. I can do a number 2 to show the start and end dates of the guide that was just downloaded, and it says this guide covers the dates from July 12th to July 19th. I hit enter to return to the menu. Number 3 says list the number of programs downloaded in that guide, and there were 30,107 programs which are represented over that 7-day period in that guide. Going back to the menu, I then do a list the number of channels, and the number of channels is 160, and there are no channels without matching channel numbers, which is what I expected. So I hit enter to return to the menu, and finally a 5 to exit that menu. At this point, I want to head back up to the Jellyfin administrative menu in the live TV section and do a plus on the TV guide providers. I'm going to choose XMLTV, and in my particular case, I'm saying /home/Scott, because it's in the Scott folder, /guide.xml. And then I go ahead and scroll to the very bottom of the screen, and I click Save. And it says there was an error accessing the XMLTV file. Please ensure the file exists and try again. Since this code runs under the Scott account, but Jellyfin runs under the Jellyfin account, I'm going to need to do a chmod 0+x, which adds the execute privilege to the /home/Scott folder. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and head back up here and click Save, and it should go ahead and save correctly. Right after clicking Save, it is going to begin doing a guide refresh automatically here, since I've added this for the first time, and it's accessing the guide.xml file that our update script created for us by downloading that TV guide from Schedules Direct. Now that my guide has been completely refreshed, I can go ahead and scroll to the top of the menu and click on Jellyfin. And you'll notice the difference here, as opposed to just having the live TV block, we now have the on now, but we have channels and we also have guide. If I click on guide, you're now seeing a TV guide here listing everything. And so I can go ahead and click on an individual show, and that will go ahead and open this option, giving me the option to record the series or record the show in particular. And the other option I have is I can go ahead and just click on a show listed all the way at the left here, like the golf here, and I can just go ahead and click play, and it will go ahead and start by playing it as opposed to recording it.
I walked away from the game for 22.
And then I can go ahead and back up. So we have a fully functional guide here. As we discussed earlier, the guide will cover the next 7 days. So since it's Saturday, the last day the guide will cover is Friday. So if I click on Friday here, it'll go ahead and show the Friday shows. But if I show next Saturday's, that's going to be blank because that would be 8 days in the future. So going back to my current day, today, Saturday, I can of course scroll down the list and see all of the various shows on, if there are guide information for those particular channels. Some channels may not have downloaded guide information simply because it is unavailable. Back at the terminal, of course, you can type update at any point in time, and that will go ahead and go back out to Schedules Direct and download any new shows that are available. You might be surprised to learn that even if you perform this a few minutes apart, it will constantly be downloading or updating new guide information. It might not be adding a future day, but it could be adding guide information due to a late change. So consequently, every time you run this, it is possible that it may receive updates. We don't want to really have to come in here manually every time and run the update manually. So in order to solve that problem, we can go ahead and do a cron tab -E to edit the cron tab, and we'll go ahead and say that we want to use the nano editor, and it will go ahead and enter the cron tab file here. We're going to go ahead and paste in this command, which I'll go ahead and put in the show notes, but basically it says run this every day at 6 a.m., run the update.guide, and put its output to a file called update_guide.log, and that way you can go ahead and look at that log file to see if there's anything of interest. From here, we'll do a Control-O and Enter to write that file out, and a Control-X to exit the nano editor, and now we can be assured that every day at 6 a.m. our Jellyfin guide will automatically be updated. Be sure to review the notes files on discussion.scotti-BYTE.com because I sure do put a lot of time and effort into creating them. And for me, I really like using Jellyfin with my HDHomeRun tuner, but the guide has always been just a little bit of an issue. And so I hope this video helps you take care of that and solve that particular issue. Anyway, thanks for listening today, and please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit your notification bell, and we'll see you next time.